I am here with my new friend, beer historian. He is a member. I want to get this right because he has a lot of titles. He's a member of the Brewseum in Chicago. Our friend Liz Garibay. I know. Shout out to Liz. You know Liz too, obviously.
Yep.
He's a fellow at
Milwaukee County Historical Society.
Milwaukee County Historical Society. But the most important thing on your resume, my friend, is you were the intern at the National Museum of American History of Beer.
Well, with their beer and brewing curator, yeah, it was. That was last summer. Thank God that was last summer. Yeah, that was a blast. That was super cool. So Teresa McCullough is the curator of beer and brewing there at the Smithsonian. Sorry, I keep stepping on my cord and it keeps moving my computer on. Yeah, right. This is the now you got to have the new graphic that's like dance party. So Teresa is the curator there and for beer and brewing. And so she's documenting craft brewing history in America. And so I got to see her at work and also, do some research with her about that part of beer in American history, as well as do my own research in DC last summer. And like I said, thank God I was urgent enough to be like, I'm going to do this year, because that would have been awful to like have all that lined up for this summer. It would have been hell. So.
Excellent job. And we got to have you back because you got to talk about what's behind you, because you look like you have one of the coolest beers.
Yeah, I got this. So I got to say I have a very patient wife. This is our living room. This is just a corner of the living room. I would say half of the living room looks like it does behind me.
The man cave is the living room.
It's not just a man cave. We're very equal opportunity here at the Harry household. It is the place where both sexes can enjoy time away. As the fact is, we don't have children, so we can do whatever we want with our living room. So the computer is on the bar right now, and then I have a kegerator over to the side of me here. That's my wife right there. Putting her own say into things. But yeah, so we live pretty good. So we got pets and we got beer, and life is good.
All right. So let's jump into why I got you here, which is People's Brewing, which is the first Black brewery in Wisconsin.
You got it.
It's not the first Black brewery in America, right?
Nope. The first, if you want to load up my slides here. I can kind of go through that. So, we'll go. I didn't even keep that one in there. That's okay. So this is okay. I don't know how that one went away, but so the first Black brewery in the United States, there was one newspaper article written about it. It was in 1955. A guy named John Randolph Smith. I don't know a lot about him. According to this news article, he was blind. He was some sort of entrepreneur. He came up from Atlanta to what seems like Trenton, New Jersey, and he bought the Colony House brand from Eastern Brewing Company and had his own brewery. I don't know when it ended. I don't know anything beyond that he owned that brewery based on a newspaper. And I've seen a couple of corroborating newspaper articles, but 1955. So well before Peoples was bought by African Americans in 1970.
Okay.
So that 15 years beforehand. So up until recently, that wasn't known. What was known about a year or two ago was what I have here on the slides, and that is Sunshine beer in Reading, Pennsylvania. So about an hour outside of Philly. They were bought by some Black businessmen from Philadelphia about 6 months before Peoples in 1969. I went out to Reading and didn't find a whole lot there either. So there's a lot of digging that needs to be done on all these things. A lot of this stuff wasn't documented because it was brief too, because Sunshine under Black ownership lasted like less than 2 years. So not a lot that's hung around about that. And then the label on the right is Black Pride, and they never had an actual brewery, but they were a beer brand that the Chicago NAACP was kind of affiliated with. And they, I love that label a lot. But they actually brewed their beer in West Bend.
Oh.
So because there was this in the brewing industry during this time, there's like massive consolidation going on, and West Bend brewed Lithia beer was their big flagship beer, and they were on their way to going out of business, which they did in 1972, and they were approached by this group of black businessmen from Chicago, and they were basically the only brewery that would agree to produce their beer. But who knows what it tasted like? There was never like an emphasis on taste. It was just like, this beer is black owned, therefore maybe black people will drink it. I don't know. Like it never came about that way. So that was like before Peoples.
Right.
Then this guy enters the scene whose name is Ted Mack. So Ted Mack was born in Alabama in the Jim Crow South in 1930, and he was an athlete who became an activist. And so he, after the Korean War, goes to play football at Ohio State, and for whatever reason, transfers to Marquette University in Milwaukee, and throws his back out before he can play any football, and gets a degree in social work, and he decides to follow that path instead. And so Ted becomes involved with a lot of different racial causes in Milwaukee, with the Congress of Racial Equality and the Human Rights Commission. He leads the Milwaukee delegation to Washington, D.C. in 1963 for Martin Luther King's March for Jobs and Freedom, the famous I Have a Dream speech. He was there for that. So really important guy. So Ted Mack starts working for Pabst Brewing Company in 1965. This is actually his Marquette yearbook photo. So you can find it pretty easily, right? Top right corner. 1958 is his Marquette photo. The reason that Ted Mack got into all this stuff is racial lines in Milwaukee during this time were really, really stressed. I mean, they still are. As you may have seen, based on what's going on in the country recently, Milwaukee is still one of the most segregated cities in America. So the map on the left is a redlining map. The map on the right is a map of the expansion of what they call the inner core. This is actually basically the black neighborhoods of Milwaukee. The federal government color-coded maps to determine housing values or housing risk for loans in the 1930s, and realtors use that to segregate people. And so you have this massive urban population going in one direction that is massively impoverished. And so Ted Mack sees this, and he has a group of businessmen with him that are like, the reason or the way to get through this and to empower our own people is to become entrepreneurs. And so Ted Mack in 1964 or 65, he starts working for Pabst, actually. They were forced to integrate the brewing industry because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so he was a noted civil rights leader in Milwaukee. And so the Pabst management hired him, and he was working at Pabst when he caught wind in 1968 that Pabst would have to divest itself of another famous Milwaukee brand, which is Blatz, because the courts had said that they were antitrust. So, which is crazy today when you see these all conglomerations like Molson or InBev. The courts were like, no, Pabst, you're big enough. You don't need it. Yep. So they try. So when he was working at Pabst, he found out that Blatz had to go. And so he got this group of black businessmen in Milwaukee that he knew together to try to make this bid for Blatz. And they were part of a huge breweries all over the place were trying to buy Blatz. And ultimately, the group they put together was called United Black Enterprises. They failed. They bought about $2 million. So they put a bid up for $9 million and said, hey, can we have some more time? And the judge says no, because I don't think you're going to be successful this anyway, because you're black.
Because you're black, right?
Like that was like you got this bid together. I don't believe it. Like, no. So Heileman's out of La Crosse. So you're probably familiar with Old Style, but that's what they brew. And so Heileman's they bought Blatz and produced it for a long time until Pabst actually bought it back. And I mean, Pabst has this huge portfolio now of beer brands. So that didn't work out. And the United Black Enterprises and Ted Mack said, well, we still want to buy a brewery, because they saw that black people were buying beer And all that money that they're spending on beer is leaving the black community. So let's find something where we can keep the beer money in the black community. So they move on to People's Brewing Company in OshKosh, Wisconsin in 1970. So again, behind the other breweries that we talked about at the beginning, but OshKosh was really white at this point. Of the 50,000 people that were listed in the 1970 census, 103 people were black. That's pretty crazy. So, and they had their own racial struggles that you can, Google OshKosh racial civil rights history and you'll find those. But People's Brewing Company was this brewery that in OshKosh, it was founded in 1911. And so it'd been around a long time, and it was hitting the same like stresses that every other small brewery was hitting at this time, where you have all this consolidation going on, and you can't keep up with production and price cuts from Pabst and Miller and Budweiser moving into your market saying we're going to offer this beer at cheaper prices, because at that point price point was like the difference. It wasn't like, hey, I want like the better beer. It was like, what can I afford to buy more of? And so Peoples agreed to sell to Ted Mack and his business associates, and in 1970, April became the first black brewery in Wisconsin. And so Ted Mack, there's one of the newspaper photos there of Ted with all the cases of Peoples going down the production line there. He had a massive plan for expansion. He really wanted this to be the beer of black culture in America. And things just didn't quite work out for just a multitude of reasons. This is one of the advertisements that they would have put in black neighborhoods or black areas. You can actually find those playing cards on eBay if you look hard enough, just a heads up. But
cool.
Yeah, right. So there's a collection at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee where I go to school that you can actually see that poster. So they had massive expansion plans, but it was thwarted by big beer and government, and they really just encountered a ton of obstacles in their way. Like the biggest example I've heard and seen is they wanted to distribute into Gary, Indiana, which still has a very large black population. They did not have a distributor in Gary, Indiana, and due to the liquor laws, they could not get their product in. They were actually met at the border by the state patrol. So, and basically, and I don't know if Ted Mack knew that was going to happen, because maybe he was thinking like, well, yeah, I'm going to do this anyway, and we'll see, we'll see what the man does. But yeah, they were stopped and turned around. I think they eventually got their product over there, but they had this massive expansion plan. At the same time, the taps in OshKosh pulled all People's products right away because of black ownership. They did get them back within the first year, but it was slow to happen. And then they had all these rumors that the beer wasn't going to be as good, so they sent like a sample down to Siebel in Chicago. There's rumors that they were going to take all of the white staff in OshKosh and replace it with black staff from Milwaukee, and none of that was true. And so like all that like comes to a head in 1972. Ted Mack tries to jumpstart business with a new stock sale to try to get some more like marketing cash.
Money,
yeah, and it was too late. He talked about moving the brewery down to Alabama, which wouldn't have been possible anyway, because like legally you couldn't own a brewery in Alabama at that point because of prohibition laws that were still on the books. He actually even talked about moving it to Africa. But at that time, like the loans, because they were able to finance the brewery with a loan from the Small Business Administration and the government, and those loans were coming due. And so the Small Business Administration took possession of the brewery, and by the start of 1973, Peoples was out of business.
Wow.
So, wow. I mean, yeah.
It was how long? I'm sorry, John. How long was People's up and running and running like a brewery?
Under black ownership, from April. Well, they bought it in April. It was like official doors opening in August of 1970. By November of 1972, so it's just about 2 years.
Well, just about 2 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is when they went out. And so then, later on it becomes there's a court case that went to the federal courts about the big breweries basically paying off distributors and retailers to like carry their product, because Budweiser and Pabst knew that these little distributors that were mom and pop things could not afford to lose their business. Therefore, they could keep out Peoples. So beer would just be stuck on the shelves because the distributors would be like, yeah, we have this agreement, but I can't take it. And the Small Business Administration, they, as an arm of the government and through affirmative action legislation, had said like, hey, we'll help you get government contracts, like through the military, because the military at that point, I don't know what they do today, but they bought quite a bit of beer. And so people, after they went out of business, actually sued the government for $1 million to say, hey, we were supposed to get this proportion of your money. And so they lost, because the judge says you weren't going to be successful anyway. Don't worry about it. And so there's all these systemic failures along the way. And like, don't get me wrong, there was racism in OshKosh and stuff like that. But a majority of the people in OshKosh supported this because it was a business and it was a symbol of their city. Because they had the OshKosh Brewing Company that made the brand Chief OshKosh. And then they had Peoples. And Peoples actually bought Chief OshKosh at one point. And so, like, this was the last brewery left in OshKosh. So they knew they weren't going to have a brewery anymore. And so, sure enough, OshKosh didn't have a brewery until the Fox River Brewing Company in the 90s. So there it is. I think that's my last. So, here's some news articles of them laying off workers. The thing is like, so there's Ted Mack later on, because that's about an article that he participated in about Ohio State football program. But he like, basically, Peoples was the last black brewery until the craft era. And in Wisconsin, we only have one brewery that has some black ownership, and that's Venture in Milwaukee.
Right. We have 3 diversely owned breweries. Meaning
3, okay.
Not owned by all white males.
Sure.
So we have we have Pearl Street, who is owned partially owned by a woman. Okay. And we have Giant Jones, owned by 2 women in Madison, Wisconsin.
Well, and then Sprecher is owned. The new owner is from India. So he's the principal owner. But I mean, just the fact that there are no, fully black-owned breweries in the state is telling of not only the politics of the state, but also the economics of the state. Yes. Because it is not cheap to start a brewery, and it's not cheap to start home brewing or go to brewing school. So there's my spiel.
Well, John, thanks. Thanks for a lot. When you in the museum had that had the people's the full hour people segment, I suggest everybody go there. It's John. It's Ted's son, right?
No, it's not Ted's. It's the one of the other guys. His name is Henry Crosby. It's his son Craig, who was part of that with me. So this is part of the investing group that bought Peoples.
Right. Yeah. So if you guys want to learn more about Peoples, and John goes more in depth, and they go absolutely more in depth about the politics and everything. That is up on Chicago Museum's Facebook page. I just looked at it last Saturday, so I know it's still there. It's a great hour. John, we have to have you back on. Actually, I want you to be our resident historian, if you would take that up.
Hey, man, whatever you need me for, I'll do my best. I'm not like, I know a lot about some things. Let me put it that way.
Yes. As I said before, I owe you a beer. Post-pandemic, we'll meet up in Milwaukee.
I like that.
Probably at Eagle Park, because I hear the best out there. So thanks, John, for your for your knowledge, and thanks for bringing the story of People's Brewing to our audience here.
No problem. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, John. We'll see you soon. I want you to come back. I want to talk about Point. Point is one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite brewery tours in this state. Actually, I think it's underrated. Sure. And I just like the history and all that. So we're gonna have you back.
Cool, man. Sounds good.
Thanks, John.
Yep. You too.